staff or case manager or case manager staff to support areas related to the services you're doing with the transitional age youth. And one of the areas that was asked had to do with the area of relapse. So within we're going to focus on that today. Substance use relapse, what that is. And so what T put together, and she'll send it all to you as a packet. Um, of worksheets that will help you refer back to the material that I'm going to be covering today. It's in a PDF, so you could have it as a resource. Um, Hi, Isaiah. So you can have it as a resource um, as well. So you can, if you need to refer back to it, you don't have to take notes. It's interactive. You can use the hand raise feature. You can use the chat. You can unmute yourself and just interrupt me if you have a question related to any of the content I'm going to be covering. And so, yeah, well, let's get started. So, in clinical psychology and generally in the behavioral health field, relapse has to do with, I'm going to just kind of scroll here. So, T, I think you have. Uh, Yeah, so understanding relapse. So this is the first, I don't know if you guys could see my whole page screen. I'll just kind of, and so it's understanding relapse and its role in recovery. And so we'll just kind of hone in right here. So relapse is generally refers to a return to problematic symptoms or behaviors after a period of improvement, or after a period of what we call remission, or it could often refer to after a period of abstinence. So for substance use. So relapse is a term that generally refers to it's a somebody what is in recovery. So you are treating and serving and working alongside young adults in recovery for substance use and mental health, right? And so the goal of services is to prevent relapse, which is problematic symptoms. Sometimes, it's this full-blown return. It's a return back to full-blown alcohol and drug use um, after a period of either abstinence or reduced use. Um, and so this doesn't mean that they they use again, right? That could be a lapse. This is where if they use again as a lapse and they take that lapse and it spins into problematic use, where they go back into their use before treatment, right? And so it's a little nuanced, relapse versus lapse. Um, so a couple of examples is a client might stop using cannabis or reduce their use for 3 months, and then they have a lapse, and that lapse turns into a resumption of, or they resume daily use. So that's just going back to problematic use. Or a client is in recovery for opioid or prescription misuse of non-medical opioid use, and um, they start to have pain again, and they're rather than working on maybe some coping responses that you've been helping them with, they think that that's not working, and then they just start taking the prescriptions again, um, and they're using it in a way that is problematic, and it resembles how it looked before treatment versus right just taking like a pill once, to saying they did that, or taking a prescription and then you intervening. So relapse is a term used in the field to trigger to give us awareness that they've relapsed, and it usually means that they're on this pattern of problematic use, and it signals like intervention. It signals like re-intervening to address things that are going on with them, psychologically, physiologically, physically, socially, right it before they like drop out of treatment, before they like right because you really want to prevent dropout or lack of disengagement. Relapse can happen while they're still in treatment, and we don't want to discharge them. We want them to remain, and we want to think about stages of change. We want to revisit the planning, right? So it's relapse is a signal for you guys to reassess their coping skills. You see that on the figure, right? The cognitive behavioral. It could be around emotional, around their cognitive, to reassess their supports, to help them reassess their triggers through what's called like a functional analysis. We'll cover that in a worksheet. To maybe step them up in treatment intensity, right? To maybe increase their sessions, the frequency of their sessions. Maybe it's a referral for a medication consult because relapse usually it's tied to cravings or intensity of cravings that are happening again. Um, Cravings is a remission factor for substance use disorders, so cravings are going to be fully present when somebody's in recovery. Um, it could be related to their motivation cognitively, like they're not motivated, something's happening, they're not thinking treatment's working. And it could be related to just that stage of recovery. Their brain neurologically is healing, and it causes what's called post-acute withdrawal, called syndrome, called PAWS, PAWS, post-acute withdrawal syndrome. That's going to affect, they're going to have symptoms that are like physical or psychological, and it's going to affect their motivation to want to even stay like, oh, I'm just feel sick. This isn't working. And they'll go back, they'll revert like to like this safe place, which is substance use full on. And that's going to look like a relapse. All right. So that's basically, I'm going to go over relapse prevention for you, strategies. And we call these positive coping, cognitive strategies, behavior modification. It really comes from this SAMHSA has developed these brief tools for you. They're evidence-based practices. Um, so relapse prevention strategies come out of cognitive behavioral therapy. You see it there, CBT. And it's strategies for you all as clinicians or counselors or case managers that are supporting, coming alongside your clients when they are in the stage of a relapse, to teach them some some skills. So it could be an assessment skill through a functional analysis. You see it down here on the right. It could be insight and awareness through functional analysis, giving them awareness, like having them understand what we would call what are their risk patterns, what are be specific to their thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and then warning signs. So that's all functional analysis, assessment, and insight awareness. And then coping skills training. This is under coping skills training here. This would end cognitive strategies and lifestyle modification. These are all what we would call relapse prevention or coping strategies, skills training. They just all kind of mean the same thing, but different. Um, there's been different references in the field. So this tip 62 references them differently. And then I have some frameworks that T put together for you from like Marlette and others that have spent a lot of time in the space of relapse prevention. But the area, so she broke them down for you. Coping skills training, these are more of your behavioral cognitive tools that can be useful with your clients depending on what's triggering the relapse. Is it not really, it's peers and social issues, not having boundaries or refusal. Maybe they're constantly in high risk situations like drug dealing or ex ex past experience with like finances, or maybe it's yeah, those kinds of high risk situations, sexual risk. So those are the how to help them navigate the high risk situation. And then the last one is mental health, right? Stress, trauma reminders, mental health symptoms, relationship conflict, isolation. Ooh. Those are all related to emotion regulation and stress management. Here, like these ones right here, right? So So depending, all your clients will have, is it about a refusal where they have peers and others that they're around environmentally, parties, or they go back to, families that are still using and substance use, and they need to work on boundaries or refusal, like how to say no, communication effectively. Or they're just in a lot of high risk situations. It could be, oh, how homelessness, housing instability, um, yeah, drug dealing, they're on the streets, those kinds of things. Commercially sexually transmitted, commercially sexual, CSEC, commercially sexual exploitation. Just think high risk situations. And then all of the rest are around emotion, um, things like stress. Then there's cognitive strategies. These have to do with cravings. So this is a physiological marker. Craving is a remission factor, and this is simply an urge, an intensified urge. They can't get it out of their mind. It's intrusive, um, and it's something cognitively, right? It's a mind. It's something in their mind, and we call it cognitive strategies. So we use a lot of like cognitive restructuring. We use mindfulness. It's even though it's emotion regulation, but for cognitive restructuring, for craving, we want them to be present with the craving. We want them to surf the urge. Um, we want them to be present with it without judgment. This is a mindfulness definition. And then we want them to take hold or control of that craving, right? The default is they have a craving, it's so intense, they're going to do whatever they default or, to get the substance to manage it. Usually it's a substance because the brain neurochemically is just in a state of deficit, right? It's unhealthy for substance use. So cognitive strategies are useful in this sense. And so these are things like a couple of like reorienting the mind to distraction or calling a friend or journaling, right? What's something that they could distract themselves with cognitively? They can also wear, like we call it, wearing a rubber band and like snapping it on their wrist to distract them away from that like intense craving, taking a cold shower, chewing on some like gum or candy, hard candy. Um, so this is going to kind of bring back their senses. If you think about if they're hypo aroused or hyper aroused, right? If you think about it clinically as grounding, right? Do you want them to like name five things you can see, four things you can smell, three things you can touch, two, right? It's that kind of idea, but it's distracting them cognitively. So there's a lot of different activities you could probably use depending on your client, but it's helping them reframe their thoughts, that kind of urge that will then result in the lapse or relapse. So that's cognitive strategies, and then there's the lifestyle. This is all around wellness, right? Think about having them think about pro-social activities, extracurricular activities like volunteering, um, exercising, maybe nutrition, eating a good meal, maybe sleeping, changing their sleep health. Spiritually, think about eight dimensions of wellness. It could be socially, like, right, a healthy environment. Maybe they need to join a community meeting, a self-help meeting. It could also be if they have access to things like community health, like joining a diabetes management group or joining a physical activity group. It doesn't have to be Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous. It could be eating, something healthy within the behavioral health realm of health, um, and just joining a meeting or a workshop, these kinds of things. And so, from a case management, I'm thinking of you, Isaiah, right? Like how to think about where these groups are in the community. Like you guys are in where they live. I know City of Hope offers free ones. There might be wellness centers in the community that offer these. Um, the LA County Department of Public Health has the 8 service planning areas, and every area region, I think you guys are in service planning area like 6 or Whittier, has a public health kind of community entity. So if you look on the Department of Public Health website, it's just finding that wellness center. Right, and then making a linkage to that. There's always things, there's food banks, there's community wellness activities that go on. They're all free, right, that happen. So ensuring that that's happening. So that's that lifestyle modification. Sometimes it's hard to do it on their own, eat right, exercise right, sleep right. But if you plug them into a class and a workshop, that can help boost that in terms of think of the buddy system, think social cognitive behavioral therapy, right? And helping relationships. So a lot of the goal is to help all of these strategies are basically preparedness, helping clients prepare well to anticipate or I can't work with this PDF. I'm just like double clicking in here. Helping them anticipate or respond to relapse risk early to get in front of it or to manage it if they have or are going to spiral into that full relapse. Um, so here is the Marlet. Marlet has done a lot of work in the area of relapse prevention. He calls it the relapse prevention counseling process. Um, Relapse is a dynamic process, right? So it's always what comes before the behavior is the emotional relapse, the cognitive relapse, the social relapse, right? It's all of those what we call predictors of relapse or what they call traps. So these are the Marlet has identified what happens before the relapse. Relapse is the behavior, like using the alcohol and drugs. So there's cognitive traps, there's the temptation, social traps, um, there's lack of coping strategies. So these are the like um, or emotional traps. They just don't have they're not using their emotional regulation coping. There's replacement activities, so the environmental traps, they don't have any replacements or places in the community or socially that they could do or go to replace some of the environmental stressors. And then preparation. I think this is misspelled T. I just noticed that for relapse. Um, yeah, and helping them with some of what they call what happens before it. They're not prepared. They're in a high risk situation. The preparedness one is usually it's just high risk, and that's a trap. They constantly find themselves in high risk situations. So just recognizing those traps um, and what Marlett calls them as antecedents. These are things that are going to be happening before what's called relapse. So it could be a high-risk situation and ineffective coping. So you want to tell them that there's a bunch of traps, but ultimately they are the biggest ones that you can refer them or educate them on is let's examine your situations. What what are you being exposed to, or what are your environmental social surroundings, physically, socially, what's going on? Um, and that would mean that they would have to make some changes to their environment, to their right. That would mean they have to go like find some positive environments or situations. And this Isaiah, like, right, this and clinical trainees would be finding places in the community to do either wellness activities or looking for a job or they have too many, they're in situations they shouldn't be in. So they need to reschedule their time. But then to do what? Fill in the blank. So they need some other situations. They need maybe different peers. So that's maybe a support meeting. They need different, you can't change a family, but you can give them things like, well, maybe you shouldn't be in that family situation. So what could you do with your time differently um, in that situation, perhaps? So maybe it's rescheduling stuff or occupying themselves in different ways. And then if they are in that situation, what are the immediate things they could do? This is called, they have ineffective coping responses. They need effective coping responses. So you want to give them some tools for their tool belt to pull from. And you probably have given them some coping responses, but maybe it's revisiting. It's saying, well, some of the things you maybe were trying or doing aren't working. This is huge, this decreased self-efficacy here, right? Ineffective coping responses. They might also have a belief in themselves. It's a cognitive malthinking or maladaptive thoughts. And that's part of that whole relapse, right? It's a cognitive trap, where they think that they're no good, right? They think they're a failure. They think that they're a loser. They revert back to that maladaptive thinking of the labels, and they've kind of developed it from a neuroscience standpoint, right? They go back to those like memories of what they've been called, maybe what they've done, and then they start thinking they're no good, right? And that's a cognitive trap. Um, and that combined with a high risk situation, like if they're continuing to be in high risk situations and they're not changing their environment, and if they're not using effective coping responses, then those three things, according to Marla, are going to lead to the lapse. Um, and then full-blown relapse. Right. So lapse will turn into a continued lapse, right? We have opportunity for intervening here, right? So it's not just they've used and like they've blown it. No, you also want to tell them that substance use lapses are opportunities for learning. So this is the avenue, right? It's like an opportunity. You want to like time out. Let's take a avenue. Like it's like let's take a down the avenue, down the street, AVE here. It's an opportunity for us to learn. Um, and then so you might need to work on their self-efficacy and their confidence, right? You want to explore that. You might need to work on their coping skills. What kinds of other coping behaviors that haven't they tried, or maybe they've tried and they need some new ideas, some new things to do. And then you need to help them and talk through their environments and reevaluate these risky situations. It's peers, it's partners, it's families, it's a neighborhood, it's a street they go down that they shouldn't be going down, those types of things. And then once you reevaluate those, they move into it's called relapse management, and now they're back in effective coping. You're helping them increase their self-efficacy, and it's going to reduce the likelihood of the full-blown relapse. That's that problematic. They spin out, they drop out of treatment, right? They're just going to go back and do whatever they were doing before they were in services. So, um, remember, use a couple of lapses doesn't mean relapse. Relapse is full blown. They've returned back to their use. They're going to stop seeing you. And that's that risk, right? That we want to kind of get in front of during services. And that's why it's called teaching them relapse prevention, how to prevent relapse. Because because lapses will happen. Um, okay, so then what are the risk triggers? So this is Marlet says that you need to help them develop an idea of risk factors and then hone in on protective factors. So you'll do like a risk protective factor analysis with them. Um, and that's something you could work on. Like you could just work on a sheet. Like let's look at your high risk situations. What's going on? Let's look at your cognitive, tr traps, your distortions. What's happening? Let's look at your emotions. What's happening? It could be anxiety, it could be anger, sadness. Let's look at what's happening physiologically. The cravings, how intense are they from 0 to 10? They're very intense. Cravings, something with substance use with cravings, if your client is having intense cravings, uh, above a five, like 5 to 10, the best practice is medication management. So you should be recommending, Isaiah to as referral to medications for addiction treatment. So there's medications for if they're an opioid user, if they're a stimulant user, if they're a cannabis user, if they're alcohol, right? There's medication management. And so this would be a referral, Isaiah, probably to HYC, somebody there that can refer them to potential medications for addiction treatment. So under SAPC, it'll elevate them to the treatment 1.0. So you might need to just have a referral. And as a SAPC contracted agency that Helpline Youth Counseling is, they can then potentially start to, they would need to then also fill out some paperwork, potentially Isaiah, I don't know, and Emily and others for 1.0, right? While still receiving services from you. But they would then benefit from treatment, right? 1.0 at Helpline Youth Counseling, which is outpatient for substance use, specifically for the medication for addiction treatment to receive access that's billable under Medi-Cal. Um, so this would just mean additional paperwork, right, that Isaiah could probably help with, um, in terms of getting them access to medications for addiction treatment, should that be something that would be helpful. So medications are specific for cravings, right? They help with cravings, they help with withdrawal. And so they are available. This would be something that would be helpful for them. And it would just, maybe take some time that you could let them know, well, we're going to be working with Isaiah as a team, and we're going to be looking to see if what kind of medications would be possible and beneficial and accessible to you. That means we need to do some additional paperwork, right? Um, so I just wanted to kind of point that out and make note of that. That there is low, there could be a self-efficacy it's a cognitive distortion. It's a cognitive belief in themselves that they're like no good anymore. Whatever they do is useless. It's not like they lack confidence in themselves to stay in recovery, right? They were doing it well, and then something happened, which is usually some environmental, something externally, right? And so it's just pointing that out that they cannot control things that are external, but they can control things that are internal. That's important with relapse prevention. You want to recognize the external dynamics that they have no control over, right? And they're real, and they're environments, there might be condition cues, they might be access, they might be people, places, things, external. They have no control over it. And it's recognizing that and it's talking about that. And that's largely going to affect their self-efficacy because they internalize that like they should be able to control it, right? But that's not that's not accurate, right, from a cognitive behavioral therapy standpoint. So we often call it a distortion, that they are like internalizing all of the external kind of dynamics. And so it's referenced as self-efficacy, so it's maybe coming alongside them doing some work around what's in their control. And a lot of what's in their control are things like dealing with the internal or emotional issues that are happening, like that are intensifying for them. And that's the mindfulness, things like what they can do to like bring their stress down. Um, and their feelings around that. And it's like breathing, stretching, the wellness behaviors. And then there's some positive self-talk. If they have a lot of negative self-talk with low self-efficacy, then there's strategies like positive self-talk. So it's the thoughts, it's the swapping out the negative thought with a positive thought. And we call this reframing, or cognitive restructuring. So there's a lot of different strategies you could do here, but it's helping them understand this, and you teach them this as a clinician or a case manager, right? You could teach them these are the risk factors and what we call triggers or stressors associated with a lapse or a relapse. Um, Another trigger would be a positive expectation about substance use. This is learned, right? So it's important to educate them that they have expectations that have been reinforced by previous behavior, right? This is called conditioning, right? And you could teach them that if they repeat substance use has been used to address a negative feeling or a negative thought, then their brain remembers that, right? It's been conditioned. And so there's a positive expectation that substance use is good. It's going to help them. It's going to relieve the pain. It's going to alleviate discomfort. It's going to make them feel better. And that's accurate because substance use is substances are all chemical, right? And they can serve as medicine. And we use them as medicine. We use opioids as medicine, alcohols in our robotism. We use prescription drugs all the time. Um, we use caffeine to help us stay alert. All of us here probably on the call. Right. Substances are helpful, but when taken out of context and they're misused, they become problematic. So that's, we want to just educate them on that, saying, uh, and acknowledging that, saying you do have a positive expectation about substance use. That is a trigger for you. However, it's shown to be unhealthy and not helpful, and we want you to be healthy, and we want to help you replace that uh, substance use with another behavior or another outlet. And that's behavioral replacement in CBT, right? That's going to be this behavior modification. It's they sometimes behavior, the strongest predictor of behavior change is behavior replacement, helping them identify alternative behaviors. So sure, you can help them with cognitive distortions. Sure, you can help them with emotion regulation, but you're going to need to help them with behavior replacements because there's a strong expectation that that behavior, this substance use behavior, is going to do it. And that's all. That's the only important behavior there is. So that's where we get into behavior replacements or helping them identify those and replace the substance use with something. Try at least try it on when they do get that. And the positive expectation will kick in when the craving and urges kick in. So maybe the behavior replacement could be the medication, and you could talk about that. Another behavior is taking the medication or trying it. There's a lot of problems. Like often we think, oh, medication's solved, right? Easy. No, a lot of patients are resistant to medications. We have with for mental health, for physical health. I mean, just this morning, my mom needed to take her medications for her cholesterol, and she gave me the middle finger. She doesn't want to take them. She thinks they're going to kill her. She didn't give me the middle finger, but she's just combative, right? Like we just patients are combative for physical health medications, like for diabetes, for high blood pressure, uh, because we just have a medication compliance issue. We just think, right, that we could do it on our own, or we don't need the medications, or the medications will make things worse. And that's the case with individuals with substance use. They're more likely to just say the substance use is fine. I'm not going to take another medication. This is real reality, right? Particularly if they've been using that substance use for a while, and or they just have problems with medications. It's just a trigger. So you might have to navigate that and educate them around how those medications are specific for craving and how they don't have adverse effects, or maybe talk through them, those kinds of things. Um, and then guilt, shame, that's going to be huge. Um, Anna Limbeck, she's a addiction psychiatrist at Stanford. She talks about the importance of pro-social shame versus negative shame. Negative shame comes from family members. It might come from indirectly us as providers, where we're like, oh, like you shouldn't be, lapse is not good for you. Um, it's this is something that's going to probably continue to reinforce you losing your loved ones if they have kids, or um, you're going to get rearrested. I mean, that just is going to reinforce guilt and shame, even though we're educating them on like the consequences. Consequences are like usually authoritative, and they're not like empathic, and they're not harm reduction. And so, like compassion. And so, pro-social shame is just compassion. Like, wow, really sorry that that happened. Um, it's to it it happens. And how can we work on it together so that it doesn't happen to again? So you're not going to go into like punitive consequences, like, relapses. You're going to continue to lose your job, and you're going to continue to like not have your kids. You're not going to be in school. You're going to have like the legal system on you. That's guilt, shame, and they have already a lot of that. And so we want to shift it to harm reduction. but we also want to use motivational interviewing here, which is compassion, empathy, and we want to redirect them to a place where they can experience pro-social shame, which is community social support groups like Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12-step program. Different churches have recovery, celebrate recovery. So just depending on your client's interests, um, uh, getting them into an environment where they can talk about the lapse in a way that's pro-social shame with you. You can also come alongside that, but then ensuring that they have that continued environment because if they don't, that's going to also be an ongoing trigger for full relapse, is the guilt and shame. Um, okay, protective factors, you're going to want to identify external protective factors and internal. So we already talked a lot about external ones. I just talked about social support. This could be in the community with a group of peers. That's a 12 step, or how to start doing maybe integrating family services in a way that you haven't done. And that might be if they're the external trigger, the protective factor will be how can you intervene and start providing some family education groups to the family or maybe identifying Al-Anon for the family. So Al-Anon is also a space in the community. And so Isaiah, this might be a resource where family members would benefit, right? Where they can learn that they can't control it. They didn't, start it. They have nothing to do with it. And that substance use recovery takes time. Um, and support is needed versus some of that negative, like punitive stuff that happens in families. Because families don't know how to deal with addiction or substance use in general, even if it's not addiction. Um, and so that might be something to identify with them. How to have safe and stable environment. They might need housing support if they're in an unhealthy or unstable situation. Maybe they're experiencing trauma. Um, and so maybe it's identifying some drop-in centers. Isaiah, this one might be, DMH has drop-in centers and that to provide safe and stable environments. I know similar to the community health programs that have the wellness, DMH, Department of Mental Health. T, I think you have a resource. Maybe you could send it that we have at our wellness fairs. Isaiah, I think you're going to be going to a wellness fair we're doing as part of youth wellness. Um, but T has developed a list, and she could share it with you guys, of drop-in centers all throughout LA County, the for 18 to for transitional age youth that just create safe and stable environments should they need that, if that's as a protective factor. What's going to be huge is structure and routine. So a lot of time they're in the relapse potential risk because they don't have structure, they don't have a schedule, they're not monitoring their time well, they're bored. And so with structure and routine, one of the best practices is in the moment is to halt and be present. So it's stop, halt, be. And they think about halt. I think we have a worksheet on it, but they do a temperature of themselves where what's going on around them. They're in an unstructured environment, and they're either hungry, they're angry, they're lonely, they're yeah, or yeah, they're halt. They're hungry, they're annoyed or angry, they're lonely. Um, and then what's the T? Can't remember the T. It's in a worksheet. Um, and they're tired, right? They're tired. There's you've heard of the acronym or the saying hangry, right? You're hangry. You're tired and you're hungry. Those are issues, right? And so to protect against that is they can a structured routine is what's the structure that you need when you have that like thought are you check yourself. Are you hungry? Are you tired? Are you angry? Are you annoyed? Are you lonely? Well, you need to do something to deal with that. You need to put some structure around that. You need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to do, right? What's the routine, right? Because then you're gonna, if you don't have a routine in place to be present with that and to swap it, then so what's that protective factor? So structure and routine. Maybe it's calling someone that they need to do. Maybe it's going to a meeting. Maybe it's going outside. Whatever that routine, that structure and routine, when they do their halt and they're present, they're being present, they need to like think about what structure and routines they need to be. So that's a protective factor. We have a halt B exercise we'll show you that you're going to want to train them or teach them on. And then reduce exposure to triggers. So this is important. So this is usually where the external, the high risk environments, they need to reduce their exposure to them. And this is a drug dealer or a street or a place or a person, a thing, people, places, things, right? What's that external thing that they need to like, you know, I don't know if you guys are Christian. I'm a Christian. I read the Bible. And Jesus says, he gives teachings. And he says, if your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. If your foot causes you to sin, cut it off. Same idea. They need to cut some things out, right? That are causing them to be triggered. Um, and so this is reduced exposure. What do they need to cut out for the moment, right? And then that's the behavior replacement. Replace it. They might need to put a lock, like with eating disorders, if it's the refrigerator, they need to put a, and they can't get rid of it. Well, they need to put a lock on it. If it's their phone and it's the internet for porn, they need to put a password. There's covenant eyes. There's these things, right? If it's a street, then a car, people put breathalyzers in their cars before they drive it. What's these? Sometimes it's these protective factors or these external things to reduce. Maybe it's they're wearing a rubber band. Maybe they have a bottle of toothpicks that are cinnamon and they put them out and they have that. It's external, some reduced exposure, cut it out, but then they replace it with a healthy behavior or they literally have to lock it down. Okay. So then internal, we already talked about those. You're going to increase awareness of warning signs. I'm going to talk you through how to do that. You're going to increase their awareness of how to have coping effective or healthy coping responses, and you're going to increase their awareness about the diminished self-efficacy that's not in their control, right? Um, and how to increase their self-efficacy, how to have more confidence. And so these are strategies with potentially working on some goals around how to build their confidence in something through small steps, maybe doing smaller things that they can gain more confidence in accomplishing things than bigger things. So there's some cognitive um, strategies you can work around self-efficacy. So we'll talk about those. I think there's some worksheets T put together for you. But ultimately, those are the worksheets and tools I'm going to go over now. But ultimately, that's Marlette's big category or big framework. I'm going to pause real quick. Do you guys have any questions on this framework? A risk protective analysis, having them understand, educating them on a lapses and a relapse, and that you have opportunity to intervene. Anything that I covered so far? Okay, I'll keep going. Um, This is just cognitive behavioral therapy, relapse prevention. Beware of when you are teaching them strategies, you need to tailor it to individual differences. So when you are teaching them or educating them, make sure you are aware of their cognitive challenges. They might have attention or concentration issues or cognitive memory impairments. You can ask them, do you have, so there's some questions around disabilities. You can ask them if they have any cognitive disabilities or learning or cognitive challenges or remembering things for a long time or sitting still or any issues with their attention. You could just ask them up front. And then if they say yes, then you could say, okay, well, let's just have a shorter session. We're going to kind of break up our sessions. Um, and you can meet them where they're at when you do some relapse prevention or even some case management. Or you could say, well, how do you best learn? I'm going to teach you some strategies on relapse prevention. Do you learn verbally? We'll talk through it. Can I show you some stuff? Can I show you a video? Um, how would you best like to learn this? That's important to, as you're teaching them cognitive behavioral strategies or relapse prevention, you're going to want to ensure you're implementing compensatory strategies to just really ensure effectiveness. You could take a break, you can repeat yourself to them, you can role play, making sure they're understanding it, and you can have them repeat back, say, just repeat back what I've told you. What did you learn? Right? Having them like reflect and repeat back. So just reminding you of those tips, that sheet's there for you. This is the functional analysis of relapse. So the behavior is the relapse or the substance use, right? The lapse. And you're going to show them this sheet. You can print it out and you could tell them, let's fill in. This is insight and awareness, right? The strategy you're working on is you want to get them aware and give them insight into all the complexities of a lapse because they have some maladaptive cognitions about it. Um, and so the consequences of a lapse could be negative, and it could be their negative thinking. The short-term consequences, again, remember, is the negative thinking. The consequence is always a thought, maybe the negative feelings, the guilt, the shame. That goes after the lapse. So the negative consequence here could also be a thought, the guilt, the shame. It's not just the destructive relationships they might have. It might not just be they lost their job or they don't, their family conflict, sure. But you want to kind of hone in on the negative thoughts here to empower them. The shame, the guilt. The long-term consequence of shame and guilt, or the negative consequence of a relapse, is poor self-efficacy. So you want to use the opportunity here around the low self-efficacy, the cognitive distortions, um, all of those, the guilt, the shame, those go into the short-term negative effects. The positive effects is this one here, where they're going to positive expectations about substance use. That is the short-term immediate positive effect of using substances is that it helped them, but it's temporary. And you want to reinforce and hone in on the temporary nature of it because the long-term impact of it is not helpful. The drug use will not sustain itself as a long-term impact. So I just wanted to point out that nuance there that is, I think, critical when you're analyzing the function of substance use for them. Then you want to get into the before. After is important, right? And this is uh, you could think of a functional analysis as ABC. If you look at a behavior, what comes before it, that's the antecedents, and what comes after it, that's the consequences. That's the same idea when we're talking about behavior change, or when your relapse prevention is behavior change, getting them to goal plan and learn new strategies, but they around their behavior. And this behavior of a substance use is complex, according to Marla. It has the triggers, the relapse is happening before the behavior. Um, the environment is related to it, and it could be distal. It could be things in their past, trauma, like a memory. It could be intergenerational trauma. It could just be they're hereditary, they're biologically susceptible, like a family history. That could be a tr antecedent. These are distal, and you want to recognize those. They might have come up, but you also want to recognize proximal, like what's happening now, currently to you in this like last week, this last yesterday. What happened today, right? What happened most proximal to the behavior. What also is what happened in the past, distal, because that still is an antecedent or a trigger of that behavior. So you want them to understand that, gain insight, awareness, And that's this whole idea here of insight awareness. Right. They're just understanding the warning signs. And if that trauma and that like past distal, that could be a referral for you to use seeking safety or to maybe refer them to Isaiah to use a different type of maybe a mental health related, like maybe they need an assessment around something that's happening to them and they're underdiagnosed in an area of PTSD or maybe it's just complex trauma that's showing up. And you can assess for that and help them understand that. And maybe there's a referral for a medication or for some type of a therapy that's more specific to that issue that isn't being addressed. Or maybe it's introducing family therapy or family services. Should that be safe and should that be an option? So you can look at distal and not say, well, sure, something you can't control. What can you control now? But how can we also plan for addressing some of that? Should that be an opportunity and open if they're open for it? So just wanted to plug that as well. So it's distal and proximal. You're going to want to hone in on the proximal ones. And so when you say the proximal, like the current ones, what is that trigger currently? So it's a person, it's a place, it's a thing. Um, right. This could be a situation. It could have been an argument, a fight. Um, it could have been some stressor, like they lost their job. And like what came before, right? The actual thing, what happened. Um, it could have been a ticket, they got pulled over, right? What is the proximal antecedent that happened before the stressor? A lot of the time it's an argument, um, but it's external. These are external, right? These are external antecedents. And then these are the internal ones. These are like, what did you think? It could have been a memory, it could have been a thought. Right. Something happened where they saw someone, it triggered a thought or a memory, it triggered an emotion, a feeling, a physical response, like some kind of like complex, think of complex trauma. They felt pain in their belly. They had a they had a gastro, they wanted to go to like nervous, right? Think about nervous system. It affects us physically and we want to go to the restroom. Their stomach started to hurt. So the emotional and the physical, they can make connections there. Did they have a headache? Physical, that's a headache. Um, any pain. And then that led to the ultimately the substance use. So you want to identify these things. It could be a bodily pain. It could be a emotion, anger, sadness, worry. Think about anxiety, depression, right? It could be a thought. It could be this, I feel that halt, be present. I feel, I thought about that person. I had a thought that they're, they always act that way. They always blame me. It's that maladaptive coping. It's like, there's nothing I could do to help myself. Oh, everything's bad now. It's all or none thinking. Like, oh, it's extreme thinking. Like, it's the worst. Like, whatever trigger happened, it's extreme thinking. Or, it's victim. Like, well, I'm a victim. It always happens to me. Um, they start thinking that the worst victim mindset, or whatever the maladaptive thought is, right? And that is going to vary with your clients. There's some common ones, like distorted thinking, all or nothing thinking, all or none, extreme thinking, denial. They start denying things, or they start thinking, well, I'm a no good person, so nobody cares about me. So it doesn't matter if I use or not. Like that kind of thinking, that could be a thought. So it's just kind of recognizing that, and then you could then again, there's a lot of work on Socratic thinking, Socratic questioning in cognitive behavioral therapy that goes into these thoughts, these maladaptive. Well, let's kind of think about that a little bit, is it really it's this or nothing, right? It's kind of bringing them back to reality, giving them some like cognitively, we have some room to think about, right? That's probably unhealthy thinking. It's not like the like what how you framed it. Let's reframe it and reframe it into a way that's more tangible, more kind of healthy thinking. Um, and then there's a worksheet I think maybe T put together on that. Or you can kind of download it from a CBT manual. We might have to send it to you, but there's like common questions, Socratic questioning, or you could Dr. Eklund might have some Socratic questioning from CBT that you can use if they do have maladaptive thoughts. Um, so that just there's depending on what the maladaptive thought is, you would come up with a plan to look for some questions to address that. So you want to examine this with them and kind of take them through that, and that can help them prepare for the relapse. This is preparedness. So now they could see, wow, this thought that I'm having, I need to work on my thoughts. Oh, these emotions are linked to this behavior. I should work on my emotions. Oh, this physical sensations that I'm feeling, like physically, I should work on that. Oh, the consequences. I have these negative thoughts around guilt, and that's going to reinforce the full relapse. I need to work on that. Or the self-efficacy. I need to work on that. So you kind of put them into you you educate them and get them to critically think. You give them insight, and this could be helpful for them planning, coming back from the stages of change, right? They'll move from relapse or lapse. They can move back into full-blown relapse, which is pre-contemplation. They're just going to remove themselves, withdraw, and deny they have a problem and remove themselves from treatment, right? Or they might go back into ambivalence, like this is where I should just use substances. It's more better for me than like this treatment stuff, pre-contemplation or contemplation. You want to move them back into preparation stage, which is planning to do something else, learn a strategy, change something that's not working, like right? And so that's preparation. So you want to get them back into this and give them insight. There's different ways you can also help them if they're not able to open-endedly, cognitively think about their emotions and their triggers. There's a trigger worksheet you can use that kind of lists common ones. You can show them this. You can say, well, let's just talk through what's going on. Maybe some distal things, what's happened before, or what's currently happening. So just we can give you some insight around your stressors, or they're called stressors. They're outside and they're inside, right? These triggers are external. These are all inside, internal to the person. Um, and then they activate their body's stress response system. That's craving. And so craving is the last physiological process that you could put on this chart here. Emotions and physical. I forgot to tell you that. The last thing you're going to want to hone in on here is craving. Craving is a physical response. It's physiological. It's like and it's also related to their thoughts. So craving usually kind of covers between these two. It's internal and it could people call craving psychological withdrawal um, from not having the substance because their brain is in recovery. But it's also it could be a strong emotion, or it could be a strong intrusive thought, or it could be physical, like their stomach or their heart's racing or they're sweating or they're like sal right? It could be reproductive stuff they're feeling if that's linked to the substance, right? It's just all of it. And that's intense craving. And that's what's called the body's stress response. Because these external triggers and internal triggers are what? Stressors. And we're a nervous system and we go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop. And so it's important to help them understand that using this kind of worksheet. So that's why we put this here so you can help them understand that their body is responding to all of these stressors externally and internally, and it's going to manifest itself as craving. And people to turn off the craving or the issue, they'll turn to behaviors like self-harm, aggression, or substance use to cope with that strong emotion, strong thought, or that external issue that they can't control, right? That which is their it impacts their self-efficacy. So substances in particular change the body. They help calm it down. They help elevate it, or right, and they help them escape. They help them go to another reality. And so this is just a helpful way to explain that to your clients, give them some insight into understanding triggers. This is associated with the functional analysis in like a deeper educational way. And then you can get them to reflect. This is a worksheet you can use with your clients when I experience these triggers or stressors. What warning signs show up? These are all warning signs. Anxiety, loneliness, a family conflict, feeling judged, a certain place, right, that they're going to identify. That's a warning sign. When these triggers happen, I am most likely to do what? Um, Sometimes it's not substance use. It could be another behavior. So you could have them put other behaviors that trigger substance use. And for some, it might be aggression or like yelling and screaming or like hitting things or harming themselves, like cutting themselves, self-harm. That's why we put common things are aggression and self-harm. Those are other behaviors besides substance use. So if they are doing that, you could then put them in the behaviors that are also linked to substance use. Um, I might use substances too, and then they can kind of reflect on to cope, to escape, to stop feeling stuck, to feel calmer, to improve mood, to feel confident or comfortable, to boost energy, to fit in or feel accepted, to feel loved, fill in the blank. So this is for them to kind of work through, and then they develop insight around that, that the substance use is really not something helpful. It's temporary, and you want to help them, give them skills to work on them more productively in a healthy way. Here's another thing T put together. This is catching the warning signs. Um, this is our emotional state. So this just goes beyond this kind of um, internal triggers, and it breaks them down into emotional signals, physical signals, behavioral signs. Um, so the physical might be the headache, it might be zoning out, it might be fidgeting or being jittery, it might be just they're immobile. They have no body sensation. Like that's fight, flight, flop or fawn, right? They've withdrawn the stress response. Um, the other behaviors, like I talked about, they might go to risky places. They might go online, right? They might game, excessively game. They might use their social media to escape, getting them to kind of realize we just gave some more examples there that they can use as well as a worksheet, and then reflect when things start to feel hard or overwhelming. How do I usually respond? So these are just two worksheets you can use depending on to get them talking through stuff and identify insight. Here's some cognitive training you can do as a counselor to help them with relapse prevention. So this is the describing them the problem. What is the worst case scenario if you're exposed to triggers? Having them kind of write that there, having them write down their emotional state, their people, the places, the things, the thoughts, the activities. They are listing out cognitively these things. The functional analysis, it's just open-ended. They're not really seeing that. You're asking them that. This is where they get to like think about it. Anything can be a trigger. And so now they're going to cognitively identify that. And once they identify that cognitively, they're going to then cognitively think about behaviors that they can swap. So once they think about the triggers cognitively, they're going to then replace that trigger with a positive behavior. Um, these could be a variety of things you can give them buckets or categories. It could be cultural, spiritual behaviors. It could be outdoor, relational behaviors, academic activities, like learning a new hobby or skill. It could be athletic or some kind of recreation. If they're not athletic, it could be a personal activity they want to kind of learn something new or do something they haven't done and they used to like to do. Um, Anything pro-social, like volunteer, do something nice, like altruism. Maybe think of things that will get them involved in a community, um, activities or like self-help groups or things that they could do there. Um, there shouldn't be a period there, but we could you could just fill in. We didn't give anything here. They can come up with their own cognitive ideas. So again, you're trying to get them to think cognitively about things in these categories. You want to just push them to think about them, right? Before you give them a list. And then here's like a list of things. These are examples of healthy coping ideas or behavior replacements. Um, and so these are behavior replacements. They don't have any ideas cognitively they think about. You can show them a list. Um, what are the behaviors from like this list that they can do? You'll get them to reflect here. So having them reflect, summarize, what kinds of positive coping skills they can do when they're triggered. So they're triggered, they want to replace that with some kind of positive behavior, which they identify here, or a positive coping idea, which could be a behavior here. So different ways you could show them that. Um, these are just some other alternative behaviors, what we call self-regulation or additional healthy coping, like that focus on wellness. So self-regulation practice here. Here's the wellness practices. These are the 8 dimensions of wellness. Um, you can ask them their values, which ones that they want to work on. So financial wellness might be something that they can work on in terms of alternative behaviors. So like Isaiah, you could be like, okay, what kind of behaviors does it take to find a job? Make a resume, uh, go on the internet, um, learn a new skill, right? Those are all kinds of behaviors right here. These are all these behaviors that they could think about to replace positive behaviors. If their wellness area that they want to focus on is financial. I'm just connecting dots here. Let's say their wellness area is physical. Well, what does it take to be physically healthy? It means having better sleep. It means eating better. It means exercising, right? So what are some behaviors you could do, right? Maybe it's joining a cooking class or learning. Maybe it's referring them to a nutrition person. They've never learned how to eat. Maybe it's a referral. Dialysis Isaiah, dialysis companies like Vita or just in the community, if you look at dialysis companies um, for renal failure, they have nutritionists that work there and they give free education on nutrition. So it's maybe connecting them with a nutritionist um, or worksheets that the nutritionist, you could reach out to them, Isaiah, and say, I'm a case manager. I work at a behavioral health agency. We're looking for some nutrition, right? Recommendations. LA County Department of Public Health also has a nutrition unit where if you go online to their department, they have a ton of nutrition activities. If the category is like eating better, um, just finding that information. If it's intellectual, going back to school. Well, what does it take to go back to school, right? They want their GED. They want spiritual. They want life meaning, purpose. They were spiritual in the past or not anymore, or they've never been, and they're interested in pursuing some type of spiritual kind of wellness. It could be social wellness. This is recreational things in the community, like finding out places to volunteer, YMCA, connecting socially with groups. Um, it could be finding a job that goes with finances. Financial wellness could be like maybe having a checking account, a savings account, learning about stocks, these kinds of things. And then environmental wellness would be things like, are they aware of, do they want to participate in something in the community they heart, like recycling, waste management, um, things like at the parks, going like identifying things that they can like give back to, um, going to the library, these kinds of things. So there's a lot of different ideas. So you guys can maybe have your own set of ideas you can think about, but then having them think through. There is mental health, emotional health. That's, you guys are giving them a lot of that. So it's pushing them to think outside of emotional wellness. Um, so I wanted to say that this is self-regulation. So self-regulation is you already teach them that's the functional analysis, but this is a worksheet you could do with functional analysis to have them put in the substance use here in a very simplified way and have them identify the behavior, substance use, how, like what were they feeling, the stressors, um, or what were they thinking, and that made them do the behavior, the external trigger. So these are just worksheets to help them see the functional analysis first, and then the second part is the self-regulation. So it's putting into practice the things that they're going to do to replace the unhealthy behavior. This one right here, which is the substance use or the anger, aggression, or the self-harm. So the behavior, what could you have done instead? How can you replace it? So if they replace the behavior, what are the short-term and long-term consequences of that with a healthier behavior coping skill? So that's why it's green. Um, and so if they have that trigger externally or internally, they're going to swap it out. They're going to practice something maybe focused on wellness, or maybe they're going to replace it by one of these. They're going to take deep breaths. They're going to, go outside. They're going to go outside and do something. So you've taught them some kind of alternatives. And so now it's putting it all together into this. That's this worksheet. You're putting it all together. And it's called self-regulation. It's not called emotion regulation because they're not just managing their emotions. They're regulating their behavior, their lapse. So a big part of relapse prevention is self-regulation and helping them self-regulate the lapse. And so we call it the behavior breakdown. They take the behavior, they functionally analyze it. You already taught them that. You already taught them skills that they can replace and swap. The wellness worksheet should have went first. That's why I went there first. And then what kind of wellness behaviors you can do instead, what kind of healthy coping behaviors you can do instead, and then you have them replace it. Um, this should have went before that self-regulation. These are just some ideas out of the wellness areas. So they can spend time outdoors, they can get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, they can practice gratitude, they can try something new, like a new hobby, they can they can work on nutrition, they can work on mindfulness or stretching, and they could put a star next to the ones they'd like to try. You guys might have seen this worksheet before. We might have sent it with some education, but this is just which wellness practices can help you feel most calm, which ones you notice will improve your energy. So it's just giving them more tangible ways to think about these areas of wellness. They're not all there. There's not financial wellness here. Um, and there's not spiritual wellness. Maybe that's meditating or yoga. Here's listening to music. This is another worksheet that Jewel made in part of our lab, and this is the scone method, savoring as a wellness tool. So they can think about their favorite meal. Do they notice that they try to prolong the meal and enjoy it? Well, they're savoring the moment. So savoring a meal is something that many people can relate to, thinking back to the good times. And so as a wellness method, it's a mindfulness to savor a positive moment. So it's called scone. Slow down, try and limit your distractions, go to a quiet private place for 15 to 10 to 15 minutes. Consider the context. What is a memory or present feeling you would like to savor? Open your senses. What did you see? Who were you with? What did you hear? Where were you? What was the temperature? What were you wearing? Notice the thoughts and notice what thoughts come to mind, even thoughts unrelated to your memory. And then enjoy the moment. Take deep breaths, feel the present. So that's called savoring the good times. It's a positive kind of reflection activity. Another one is remember the time with a loved one. So this is level up their connections. It helps them do relational savoring, is the act of intentionally noticing and savoring good feelings that and moments that they shared with a loved one. So they can think of a favorite memory they spent with a friend, a family member, a mentor. Who were they with? What were they doing? Zoom in the positive moment. What made it feel good? I saw, I heard, I felt. This felt special because, and then the takeaway. What is one thing they appreciate about that relationship with that person? I appreciated that. So, what is one thing you'll do to create moments like this? So, this is having them think, right, the positive thinking. It's called savoring the moment if they're just in a negative thinking mode. Um, so, these are just two strategies they could do as well. This was that temperature check I told you about, where they halt and be present. Um, this is the structure and boundaries. It gives them some structure around that. So it's they halt, they stop, and they be present with how they're feeling. Are they hungry? Are they angry or annoyed? Are they lonely? Are they tired? Are they bored? Are they excited? These are triggers, right? Being present and mindful of what they're feeling before they act. It can help them bring structure and boundaries around it. And so the structure and boundaries is having them do the behavior replacements, right? Which are all these coping strategies that you that they talked about. So their halt, they be present. That's another tool. These are just mindfulness, healthy coping as we wrap. These are things to like thought on a cloud where they can get comfortable. Thought on a cloud activity teaches them to acknowledge the intrusive thoughts without judgment. That's mindfulness and gently let them go, push them away. So then they're going to take the negative thought or a unhealthy worry pattern. They're going to imagine the thought floating up into the sky and landing on a fluffy cloud. The cloud carries it away across the sky. They're still here. The thought is just passing by. So you could take them to these 5 steps to get into that mode. And then how do they feel after that? So this is a role play activity. You can use an app or music. Um, to guide the cloud activity. There's a lot of activities online, so you could do that online with them. This is called healthy breathing. There's box breathing, belly breathing, pace breathing. You can help them when they're dysregulated, right? They're, specifically if they're in an emotional state, they're angry, um, they're annoyed, they're sad, they're worried. Breathing stimulates the vagus nerve and it helps the body regulate the distress by bringing it back into norm, like a normal breathing. And they might be breathing heavier, might be breathing rapidly. So this might be helping them engage in, I don't know what just happened, helping them engage in breathing to help them bring back themselves to 5 to 10 breaths per minute. So you can say, well, how's your breathing? Is it usually doubles or triples during the resting rate during stress. So when they're triggered, right? So it's important to educate them on why deep breathing because the vagus nerve, right, stops working during stress. Their parasympathetic system that's used to regulate the stress response is impaired. It's dysregulated. It goes off. And so they need help bringing it back online, the dysregulated nervous system. So breathing, box breathing, belly breathing, pace breathing just helps with that. So you guys can show them the 3 different type. I'm not going to show you here, but You're probably familiar with them. It's breathe in for 4, hold 4, breathe out for 4, hold your breath for 4. It's a box. Belly breathing, this is where they sit or they could also be laying down, and they place one hand on their chest and one hand on their belly, and they inhale deeply through their nose, pushing their belly to expand like a balloon and making sure they feel it in their chest and their belly, and then they exhale slowly, constricting their belly to flatten. So they can make the sound of the belly like in and out, but it's really to feel the belly and feel the chest and the heart. And you're having them like belly breathe. You're having them like physically. They do this with like sound baths. They'll have them like, put put because we feel stress in our bodies. They'll do that. And then pace breathing, you could put on music, instrumental music, like the sound of rainfall or the sound of white noise and that to help them calm. And then they could start breathing to the rhythm of their heart, right? 4 beats to 6 beats. And this is like match the music rhythm to their heart to make their body in it back into a kind of rhythmic. And you could talk about heart health as well, and how it's tied to the vagus nerve. So it's really helpful to tie these to physiological processes that are happening to their stress to get buy-in for relapse prevention. This is the positive self-talk. You're going to have them think, stop, swap that we talked about. A lot of them, here's some examples of negative self-talk. They're going to always a mess up. I'm no good. I'm a loser. I'm bad. I'm a failure. It's too late to make a difference. And then you want to change their mindset. What are some things they can say? Maybe you can ask them, what do other people say about you? Well, here are some examples. I'm trying my best. I am loved. I can do it. I make mistakes. I'm learning. I care about myself. I'm better than that. So they catch the thought, they stop it, and then they swap it out. So that's just cognitive restructuring. It's cognitive training. Here's some emotion regulation. This is muscle relaxation. Again, the body with stress. Their body under stress can go into gridlock, and their nervous system's rest digest mode is not working. So another tool to help them is to do the breaths, but then get into a from head to toe where they're breathing, but they're feeling and restricting areas of their body. So they're clenching their jaw. They're like raising their eyebrows. They're like shrugging their shoulders to their ears. They're like moving their wrists, right? They're engaging their body physically while they're breathing to help their body relax. It's called progressive muscle relaxation from head to toe. There's videos on YouTube that can walk them through it if you don't want to walk them through it as a case manager or a counselor or trainee, right? So you could do that and then end with some deep breaths. This is educating them on the stress response of how certain triggers, when you're talking about the functional analysis, can can cause them to flip their lid, can cause them to feel angry, want to hurt someone, want to hurt themselves. And this is Dan Siegel's work. He goes over like the brain. He has the fist, and he'll talk about this is the amygdala, and then this is the limbic system, and then the thumb is the amygdala. And so it just kind of talks the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, the limbic system, and these regulated go together, unregulated, right? Flipping your lid, like the prefrontal cortex goes up, that means you're more likely to make bad decisions based on how you feel. And if somebody has dysregulated you or stressed you out, you might this whole the your limbic system goes out of whack, dysregulated, and it looks like this. You're dysregulated and you flipped your lid. And the prefrontal cortex offline, your amygdala, your limbic system's wacky. And so you're going to do things that you probably shouldn't be doing, like aggression, self-harm, or substance use, because your brain goes into what's called survival mode, instinct. And so it's once there's you want it to calm down, right? You want it to think logically, cognitively, and emotionally. Those are the coping skills. So you can educate them if they're highly dysregulated on the flip lid kind of analogy to Dan Siegel's hand model. There's YouTube videos. Um, then these are coping responses to the flip lid usually, or just highly dysregulated states. We call it hyperarousal and hypoarousal. So this is when the body goes into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop. There's some quick regulation strategies if they're in hypoarousal, like deep knees, you want to slow down your system. Bends, burpees, jumping jacks, that breathing we showed you the progressive muscle relaxation, like some stretching, holding something heavy, like a weighted blanket or a warm cup of water, using like something to engage the senses, like if you have a sensory, like fidget toy or Play-Doh, or just engaging them in a grounding exercise, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, having them distract themselves. What do they see? What do they hear? What do they taste? What do they smell? What's one thought they have? Right after that. So that's called when they're hypoaroused. When they're hypoaroused, you want to awaken the system. They're numb, depressed, helpless. So you want them to maybe suck on sour candy, hold a textured object like a rock, describe it, drink cold ice, take a cold shower, chew on ice, chew on gum, smell something like some kind of oil, citrusy, peppermint. Count back your count backwards from 100 by fives. So you want to either teach them these quick self-regulation strategies when you're doing that functional analysis, or you're having giving them some behavior replacements when it's like immediate. Um, and this helps them deal with the strong cravings physiologically. Um, you want them to reflect. Which ones will they use? What's some other ideas? This is the grounding. This is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. This worksheet just explains it. Um, Take a minute to breathe deeply and then name 5 things you can see. Keep breathing. Name 4 things you can touch. Keep breathing. Name 3 things you can hear. Keep breathing. Name 2 things you can smell. Keep breathing. Name 1 thing you can taste. Sometimes you could say, now, how do you feel? Name one feeling. These are examples of self-regulation strategies that they can calm themselves down, they're practical tools. They could do nature or movement, nervous system reset, spend time outdoors, movement breaks, music and rhythm. These are emotional soothing, um, creative expression. They can draw, they can craft, they can journal, comfort object sensory play, giving them or referring them to like have some kind of plush, some kind of fidget toy, sand, stress balls, slime, weighted lap pads, warm water in a mug, warm socks. Maybe they can warm up their socks, in a microwave, these kinds of things. Nutrition, mealtime activities, no screens, no phones, and include healthy choices. Talk through different food groups. What can they pick? So just gauge their senses, and then have them end with a developed plan. As we wrap here, you want them to identify safe people they can contact and they can count on. It could be a mentor, somebody, it could be a family member, it could be a friend, somebody that's safe that they can reach or contact. How can they help them? Maybe talking things out, distraction, advice, help with a crisis, reaching out plan. What will you say when you need help? Hey, I'm not feeling okay. Can we talk? I'm having a hard time and could use some support. What kind of message would you say? And an emergency support. I feel overwhelmed and safe. I will call, text, or go to. So this is having those resources, maybe Isaiah, like that drop-in shelter, or maybe things they could do. Maybe it's a counselor, maybe they could reach out to you, uh, or their case manager. Maybe they could reach out to you guys as a way, or some kind of other crisis line. And that T, I think you have resources at the end of this that have crisis line. Um, I'll show you guys my prevention plan. So they sum it up. Prevention means taking care of themselves before things get overwhelming. So here's a preparedness plan. My warning signs I will watch for. Those are those triggers, people, places, and things. My triggers to be aware of um, that can lead them to struggle. Who's their support system? What is important? Why? Digging back into their motivation. Why is it important to not fully relapse and fall out of services? What's one goal they're working towards? This could be a wellness goal, those 8 dimensions: financial, occupational, spiritual, mental, emotional, physical. And then my go-to coping, the things that you covered with the worksheets. What's the thing that they're going to kind of work on this week? It could change it up. Their daily wellness habits. Um, this is coping, this is wellness. We just kind of broke them up into 2 areas. And then here's their contact card. Housing, appointments, this might also take them referring them, maybe the medication that we talked about. Maybe it's an appointment with some health. Maybe it's an appointment they have with you to do a family intervention. Maybe it's an appointment with a housing. It just depends. So we kind of broke it up into areas that might be helpful. And then those are the resources. This is the SAPC one that has that if you are going to use create medications for addiction treatment, um, these are agencies we might plug in with. Helpline Youth Counseling is there. You want to circle that and elevate them to 1.0 because they're not in 1.0. And that, you would then, the contact person they'll work with, Isaiah, is, who for the medications that they're going to be working with. Or if HYC does not have medications, well, we can implement finding where medications are available. And Isaiah, you can work through this, I think, with maybe Rocio or somebody, Cecilia, um, to help with medications. These are the mental health and safety, like for crisis, you want to give them a plan. The mental health crisis line, DMH, the 988 crisis line, the housing kind of resource link, any physical health needs or work, financial. We just have some resources here that you have some other ones, I'm sure, that you can maybe like fill in the blank here or fill in the blank right here, emergency support. Um, yeah. So these are the tools that we wanted to cover related to relapse prevention, what it is. Let me just go back up. So you'll have this in summary. The first one is what is relapse prevention, where it comes from, the framework, understanding it, the tools you'll teach, functional analysis, understanding triggers, early recognizing, cognitive training, and then behavior modification, healthy coping, and then other strategies around self-regulation, putting it all together. So before self-regulation practice, you should start with this should go first. Wellness, savoring, temperature check, and all the healthy coping that they could use to behavior swap. Breathing, stretching, positive self-talk, muscle relaxation, understanding dysregulation if they're highly dysregulated in crisis mode, teaching them why it's their nervous system goes into dysregulation because they flip their lid. And if they are hypoaroused or hyper or hypo, here's some quick tools and self-regulation strategies. But ultimately, all of it comes back to this last worksheet, which is number 1 here, self-regulation practice, where they identify all their triggers that are related to their behavioral lapse and they swap it out. What are they going to try on? That's your kind of end worksheet for self-regulation. And they have to have a plan for emergency and case management. And that's those last 2 or 3, these plans. So you have this tool that T will send to you. At this time, we'll open it up for questions. And if you guys don't have any questions, I think Eklund said we can end early. That's a wrap. Do you guys have questions or thoughts?